Welcome to the Estrangement Project, where we talk about estrangement, relationships, boundaries, and the family dynamics that shape how we connect with other people. Today, we're talking about something a lot of estranged adult daughters hear from relatives. You got this from TikTok. Maybe your sister says everybody is a narcissist now. Your aunt says therapy makes people selfish. Somebody in the family says people used to work through problems instead of cutting off their parents. Before long, the conversation has moved away from your actual relationship with your mother and into a debate about social media, therapy culture, boundaries, and whether younger generations give up on family too easily. Some professionals have raised similar concerns. People learn psychological language online, apply it gratuitously, and sometimes make serious decisions based on simplified information. Words like narcissist, toxic, trauma, boundaries, enmeshment, and emotional neglect are everywhere now, and people don't always use them accurately. Every difficult parent isn't a narcissist. Every disagreement isn't abuse. Every uncomfortable interaction doesn't call for no contact. People become estranged for many reasons, including religion, politics, conflict over partners, ongoing criticism, differences in values, and years of unresolved problems. Social media can also oversimplify complicated relationships. You can watch a 60-second video about 5 signs of a narcissistic mother and recognize 3 of them. That doesn't give you a diagnosis, and it doesn't tell you what to do with the relationship. Sometimes a label feels convincing because you've been confused for years. And once you find a word that seems to explain everything, you can stop looking closely at the details. The problem starts when relatives use this argument to explain your estrangement without asking what happened. They don't ask what the arguments were about, how long the problems had been going on, what happened when you tried to set limits, whether you had direct conversations, or what finally made you stop speaking. Instead, they say, she got into therapy, or she started watching those videos online, and they feel like they understand the whole situation. If a woman reads about emotional neglect and recognizes her own childhood, the article didn't create her childhood. It gave her language for experiences she already had. Before learning the term emotional neglect, she might have said, my mother was around, but I couldn't really talk to her. She might have said, I don't know why I hate asking people for help. Or, nothing dramatic happened, but I always felt like I had to handle everything myself. Then she learns there are actual concepts that describe some of those experiences. The internet didn't give her those memories. TikTok didn't create the relationship. Therapy didn't change what happened when she was 12. She found words for something she had already been trying to understand. And sometimes those words come from the internet because nobody in the family was ever going to use them. Families develop their own ways of explaining behavior. Maybe your mother was called difficult. Maybe everybody knew not to upset her. Maybe relatives joked about her temper, or everyone knew which subjects to avoid during holidays. Nobody called any of this control, emotional immaturity, enmeshment, or emotional neglect. It was simply how your mother was, and everyone adjusted around her. You learned how to deal with her long before you knew there were names for some of the things you were doing. Then you got older, started reading, went to therapy, listened to other people's experiences, and realized some of those family patterns had been studied and described for years. Learning the language is different from being convinced a healthy relationship was abusive. There's also an assumption that estrangement happens quickly because someone watched the right video at the wrong time. For most people dealing with long-term family conflict, no contact comes after years of smaller decisions. Maybe you stopped telling your mother personal things because she repeated them. Maybe you started meeting her in restaurants because visits at home always became tense. Maybe you shortened phone calls, stopped answering immediately, or tried to explain what was bothering you and asked her to change specific behavior. You can spend years tolerating a relationship before anyone else realizes how bad things have gotten. By the time relatives notice the estrangement, they're often seeing the final stage of a much longer process. They weren't present for every phone call, every argument, every attempt to make things easier, or every time you decided to try again. Saying TikTok caused the estrangement also gives the rest of the family an easier explanation. If social media caused it, nobody has to ask whether your mother treated you differently when no one else was around. Nobody has to reconsider behavior they witnessed and ignored. Nobody has to think about why everyone had already learned to avoid certain topics, manage her moods, or keep quiet when she was upset. The discussion can stay focused on young people, therapy, phones, and culture instead of what happened inside the family. Guilt often gets pulled into this argument too. If you feel guilty about estranging yourself from your mother, someone might say the guilt means you know the decision is wrong. If therapy helps you understand why you feel guilty and the guilt becomes less intense, the same person might say therapy taught you to stop caring. Now, either response can be used against you. You explain that you spent years trying to make the relationship work, and they say therapy taught you to reinterpret everything. You describe something specific your mother did, and they say you're using therapy language. You explain that you felt this way before therapy, and they say social media changed how you remember the past. At some point, the conversation stops being about understanding you because they've already decided why you're estranged. And anything you say gets added to the explanation they already prefer. There can be bad therapists. There are people online giving irresponsible advice about family relationships. There are creators who call almost every unpleasant interaction narcissistic abuse. And people do sometimes use psychological language carelessly. You still have to look at your own relationship and what actually happened in it. What happened when you tried smaller boundaries? What happened when you communicated directly? Was the behavior occasional or did it continue for years? Could you disagree without being punished for it? Could your relationship adjust when your life changed? Could your mother hear that something hurt you without immediately dismissing it? What happened when you stopped doing what everyone expected from you? Those questions tell you more about your situation than whether TikTok has too much therapy content. If you found a term online that helped you understand something, you can still examine whether it fits. You can read more than one source, bring it into therapy, compare it with your actual history, and change your mind if the description stops making sense. Learning a word doesn't require you to build your whole life around it. The same is true of boundaries. Families have always had them, even when nobody used that word. People moved away, stopped answering calls, skipped holidays, stopped sharing personal information, kept visits short, avoided certain relatives, and sent their children to one grandparent's house while refusing to send them to another. Some families had relatives who hadn't spoken in 20 years and still didn't use the word estrangement. A daughter could move across the country and speak to her mother twice a year without anyone calling it low contact. Someone could stop attending family gatherings and eventually disappear from family conversation altogether. The language has changed, but the behavior has been around for a long time. So when somebody says nobody in this family ever cut anyone off before, that might say more about how the family described conflict than about whether people actually became distant. And if your family thinks TikTok caused your estrangement, you don't have to spend hours defending yourself. If someone is genuinely curious and willing to listen, you can talk about what happened. Some relatives aren't asking though. They're telling you what they already believe. You can say, there's a lot you don't know about what happened between us, and I'm comfortable with the decision I've made. Or maybe I'm not discussing my relationship with my mother. You don't owe your full history to every person who decides your boundaries came from the internet. For more information about estrangement, boundaries, difficult family relationships, and life after no contact, visit theestrangementproject.com. You'll find articles, books, and other resources that go deeper into these conversations. And subscribe to the Estrangement Project for more videos about estrangement, relationships, boundaries, and family dynamics.